During a Christmas gathering, my son-in-law called me a foolish old man, loudly mocking my historical knowledge. The room fell silent when another guest, wide-eyed, addressed me as professor and shook my hand. My son-in-law's smug grin vanished, and his world seemed to crumble. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments what time it is where you are. Listen, old man, I'm certain. Gettysburg was in '64. Trevor's voice sliced through the warmth of my library. I set my coffee mug down deliberately, the ceramic tapping against the mahogany table. My leather chair creaked as I straightened, 40 years of academic composure holding steady despite the tremor in my chest. Actually, Trevor, it was July 1st to 3rd, 1863. My tone remained measured and calm. Trevor's face flushed above his expensive sweater. He slammed his hand on the mantel, making the photos shake. Enough. You're just a confused old man. The fire crackled in the silence. Emily shifted on the sofa, her hands twisting. Trevor, please. I've studied this for 4 decades, I said quietly, gripping my mug. Trevor spun around, his designer shoes squeaking. Maybe it's time you stopped. That documentary said 64. You're losing it, Martin. Emily stood abruptly. That's enough. Dad knows what he's talking about. Oh great. Trevor shot back. Now you're taking his side. I'm stating facts, she said, moving toward the closet. Dad taught Civil War history for decades. Trevor laughed coldly. Taught, past tense for a reason. His words stung. I watched him grab his coat, sharp with indignation. Emily followed, pale but resolved. We're leaving, she said, avoiding my eyes. Gladly, Trevor snapped. I don't need to listen to ramblings from someone who doesn't know basic history. Emily finally met my gaze. Her green eyes, so like her mother's, full of apology and frustration. Dad, it's fine, sweetheart, I said gently. Drive safely. Trevor was already at the door. Come on, let's go somewhere with people who live in reality. Emily hesitated, then followed. The door closed softly, echoing through the empty house. I stayed in my chair, listening to his car start and watching their headlights sweep across the snow-dusted lawn. The red taillights vanished, leaving me alone with the dying fire and the word fool lingering in the air. Standing slowly, my knees stiff, I walked to the window. The street lay peaceful under December snow. Other houses glowed with warm light, families sharing normal Sunday dinners. I pressed my palm to the cold glass and watched until their lights disappeared completely. The door's final click settled deep within me. I stood there a moment, hands still on the knob, surrounded by silence. Fool. The word echoed. 40 years of teaching, and this young man tells me I don't know basic facts. I walked slowly back to my library, past the family photos that had witnessed our argument. Emily's wedding picture smiled from the mantel, her radiant face beside Trevor's confident grin. How different that grin had looked tonight, twisted with contempt. My extensive bookshelves stretched before me, hundreds of volumes carefully arranged over decades. I knew exactly where to look. My fingers traced worn spines until they found the burgundy leather Encyclopedia of American History, Volume 7. The book fell open like an old friend. I'd referenced these pages countless times. The Battle of Gettysburg. I read aloud to the empty room. July 1st through 3rd, 1863. I set the book down and reached for my notepad, a decades-old habit. My fountain pen scratched across paper. Gettysburg, July 1st, 1863. Union victory, turning point of the Civil War. The words stared back, precise and familiar. I knew them by heart, had recited them to thousands of students. Each fact was carved into my memory. I pulled down another volume, then another. The Civil War Encyclopedia, Battles and Leaders, Military History of the United States. Every source confirmed the truth. The scent of old books surrounded me, leather, aged paper, the faint must of accumulated knowledge. This library was my life's work, my passion, my solace after Margaret's death. 4 decades teaching Civil War history, guiding young minds through America's bloodiest conflict, and my own son-in-law dismissed me as a confused old man. I looked up at my diplomas, bachelor's from Oregon State, master's from University of Washington, PhD from Stanford, 40 years at Portland Community College, 3 published papers, students who still sent Christmas cards, all meaningless to Trevor. I glanced at a family photo, Emily at her high school graduation, brilliant and curious. When had she stopped defending intellectual rigor? When had she chosen peace over truth? The encyclopedia lay open. I traced the entry, each word a small vindication, but for whom? The empty house offered no audience. Closing the book gently, I looked again at Emily's photo, full of promise. That girl would have corrected Trevor immediately. What had happened to her? I returned the book to its place. The question hung in the air, unanswered. 5 days until Christmas. 5 days to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. The week passed slowly. I tended my garden, read, replayed that evening repeatedly. Each morning brought coffee, the newspaper, the quiet rhythm of retirement. But beneath the surface, the word fool had burrowed deep. Friday morning arrived gray and cold. I stood at the kitchen window, watching snow dust the oak tree, when the phone rang. "Dad," Emily said, her voice artificially bright. "Hello, sweetheart." I set my mug down. "I wanted to ask about Christmas." She paused, choosing her words. "Will you come to dinner? We're having Trevor's parents, some neighbors, a few colleagues." The invitation surprised me. "Of course. Does Trevor mind?" Another pause. "Everything will be fine, Dad. I promise." Her careful tone said everything. Trevor didn't know, or wasn't happy. "What time should I arrive?" "Around 6, just family and friends. I'm making that crown roast you love." "Sounds wonderful." I marked the date on the calendar. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself, Dad." As I listened, I realized this gathering might be a chance to address the tension between us. The mention of colleagues sparked a memory. Trevor worked at Morrison and Associates. "Emily," I said gently, "about Sunday." "It's forgotten, Dad. Ancient history." Her words came too quickly. "I'll see you Christmas Day." "Okay." "Ancient history," I repeated after she hung up. The phrase lingered. I folded the paper to the local section. My eyes stopped on a small item. "Morrison and Associates celebrates successful year." The article mentioned the firm's growth, their reputation, Trevor's workplace. His colleagues would be at dinner. I set the paper aside and looked at the calendar. December 25th, circled. 5 days to prepare. 5 days to consider what kind of Christmas gift a father might give his son-in-law. Morning light shifted through the window. Outside, snow fell, fresh starts, clean slates. I smiled for the first time since Sunday. The weekend passed quietly. By Tuesday, Christmas Eve had arrived with significance. Today felt different. If I was going to face Trevor's dismissal, I would do it properly. The navy suit from my closet, worn when they awarded the Nobel Prize in History to Professor Anderson, seemed appropriate. Dressing was a ritual. 40 years of teaching taught me that appearance matters. I trimmed my beard, polished my shoes, adjusted my tie with precision. The kitchen table became my staging area. Brown paper, gold ribbon, scissors. Emily's gift, a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt she'd mentioned months ago. Professors never forget a student's interests. The wine took more effort. I'd spent an hour at the market yesterday, finally choosing a Burgundy from a vineyard Margaret and I visited in France. Not too showy, but quality. My hands moved methodically, creasing edges, sharp corners. The biography disappeared under elegant paper. The morning newspaper lay beside my coffee. Christmas Eve events around Portland. Normal families doing normal things. I wondered how many were walking into situations where their competence would be questioned. Church bells chimed 9 o'clock. I had 9 hours until Emily expected me. 9 hours to maintain calm. Standing before the hall mirror, I adjusted my tie. The reflection showed steady gray eyes, a man who'd spent 40 years teaching young minds to think critically. That man deserved respect. Break breath. My coat hung ready, gloves tucked in pockets, keys on the table, everything prepared. As I gathered the gifts and walked to the garage, I wondered if this Christmas Eve would begin a new chapter or add complexity to an already complicated relationship. The engine turned over smoothly. I arranged Emily's gift and the wine on the passenger seat. 20 minutes across Portland to their house in Laurelhurst. 20 minutes to prepare. I backed out of the driveway. The drive through holiday-lit neighborhoods gave me time to observe and prepare. Their streets sparkled with decorations. Their driveway held 4 cars, a BMW, Lexus, Subaru, and a practical Honda, probably the neighbors. I parked behind the Honda, and gathered my gifts. Through the front windows, I saw movement, heard conversation and laughter. The party was in progress. The doorbell chimed. Emily appeared immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Dad, you look so distinguished." She kissed my cheek. "Very professorial. Thank you, sweetheart." I handed her the wrapped biography, something I thought you might enjoy. Following her inside, I carried the wine and surveyed the scene. Their living room was a holiday showcase. A 10-foot tree with white lights, garland framing the fireplace, red and gold decorations against cream walls. 8 or 9 guests chatted in groups, wine glasses catching firelight. Then Trevor's voice cut through the chatter. "Well, well, here's our confused old man, the one who mixes up dates." Every conversation stopped. All eyes turned to me as I stood in the archway, holding the burgundy. Laughter rippled through the room, uncertain, polite. Trevor stood near the fireplace, surrounded by 3 younger couples. His confident grin suggested he'd been building to this moment. "Everyone meet Martin, Emily's father," he said with theatrical flourish. "He thinks Gettysburg happened in 1863. Can you believe it?" More laughter, though some guests looked uncomfortable. I maintained composure, drawing on decades of classroom experience. "Lovely to see everyone," I said calmly, setting the wine down. Emily moved quickly to my side. "Dad, let me introduce you to the Hendersons. And these are Trevor's colleagues from Morrison." No, Trevor interrupted, enjoying his audience. "Let me tell them about Sunday's argument first. This is educational." An older gentleman near the bookshelf looked up, his expression thoughtful as he studied me. Something in his bearing suggested academic discomfort with Trevor's performance. The History Channel documentary was crystal clear. Trevor continued. "Gettysburg, 1864. But Professor Emeritus here insists on outdated information." The laughter felt forced now. Emily's face had paled, her hands clenched. I accepted a glass of wine from a tray and smiled politely. "Thank you for including me." But my eyes found the distinguished gentleman by the bookshelf, who was watching me with growing recognition. 15 minutes of polite conversation passed. I'd navigated the social minefield with academic grace. The Hendersons were delightful. Trevor's colleagues seemed intelligent but deferred to their host's narrative. I gravitated toward Emily's bookshelf, seeking refuge in familiar comfort. Her collection revealed good taste. Historical biographies, contemporary fiction, philosophy alongside travel guides. My daughter had inherited that, at least. "Professor Banks." The voice carried enthusiasm. I turned. A distinguished gentleman with silver hair approached. "I'm sorry. Do we?" "Henry Wilson. We worked together at Yale. I taught economics while you revolutionized the history department." Recognition dawned. "Henry, it's been at least 15 years. He clasped my hand warmly. "You look the same, though I suspect you're enjoying retirement more than committee meetings." Our conversation drew subtle attention. The Hendersons paused to listen. One of Trevor's colleagues glanced over curiously. "Yale, was it?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "How wonderful you found each other." Henry's enthusiasm overflowed. This man was a legend. Students camped outside his office hoping to get into his Civil War seminars. My cheeks warmed. Emily watched nervously from across the room. "Henry exaggerates," I said modestly. "I just tried to make history relevant." "Relevant?" Henry laughed, addressing our growing audience. This modest man published the definitive analysis of Gettysburg strategy still cited in military academies worldwide. The word Gettysburg seemed to echo. Conversation near the fireplace faltered as Trevor's ears caught the reference. His voice grew louder, competing for attention. Henry continued, oblivious. "I remember when Harvard tried to poach you. The history department formed a human chain around your office." More guests drifted toward us, drawn by Henry's animated stories. "What was your specialty, Professor Banks?" asked one of Trevor's colleagues, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s. Before I could answer, Henry jumped in. "Civil War history, particularly battle tactics and political implications." Martin could recite troop movements at Gettysburg from memory, down to the hour. Trevor's voice grew more insistent, but several of his listeners were now glancing our way with interest. The social dynamics were shifting. Emily appeared with a fresh wine bottle. "Dad, would you help me in the kitchen?" But Henry was warming up, and our audience seemed genuinely intrigued. Henry's enthusiasm overflowed. Our group had grown to include the Hendersons, 2 colleagues, and others who'd abandoned their conversations. 35 years Martin taught at Yale, Henry announced. Brilliant lecturer. Students camped outside his office. Mrs. Henderson leaned closer. "What was your field, Professor Banks?" Henry answered with zeal. "Civil War history primarily, but his real genius was connecting historical patterns to economic theory, interdisciplinary work before it was fashionable." Emily hovered near the kitchen, pale as she watched. His research on economic consequences of historical events was revolutionary, Henry continued. That's what earned him the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1998. The words hit like a thunderclap. Silence fell. Even background conversation paused. Wine glasses froze. The Hendersons exchanged startled glances. "Did you say Nobel Prize?" whispered Sarah, the colleague from the firm. Henry beamed. "Indeed." The committee recognized his groundbreaking analysis of how historical conflicts reshape economic systems. His paper on Civil War monetary policy influenced Federal Reserve practices for decades. Heat rose in my cheeks. "Henry, you're too kind. It was collaborative work." "Nonsense." He turned to the circle of listeners. "This modest man revolutionized how we understand history and economics. Harvard tried to steal him twice. Princeton made incredible offers. The room's acoustics had changed. Trevor's voice still carried, but his audience was drifting away. Even the Christmas music seemed muted. "I remember the faculty celebration when the Nobel Committee called," Henry continued. "The whole department gathered. We always knew Martin was special, but international recognition felt like vindication for all of us." Sarah stepped closer. "Professor Banks, do you still publish? Research current economic patterns?" "Retirement has its pleasures," I said carefully, aware of Emily moving toward us. Henry laughed, still humble. "Martin, you must tell them about consulting for the Smithsonian lecture series." But his words competed with heavy, purposeful footsteps. Trevor had noticed the quiet, the gravitational shift toward our corner. "Wait, what's all this about a Nobel Prize?" His voice cut through like a knife. He pushed through the crowd with aggressive confidence. Henry turned enthusiastically. "I was just telling everyone about Martin's career at Yale. Distinguished." Trevor's laugh held no humor. "This is nonsense. He doesn't know basic historical facts." The energy shifted toward discomfort. Guests stepped back. "Trevor," Emily warned, but he was beyond hearing. "He claimed Gettysburg was in 1863. Trevor continued, volume rising. Complete confusion. I corrected him myself. Henry looked bewildered. "I'm sorry, but Gettysburg was indeed July 1st through 3rd, 1863. That's established historical fact." "Break breath." "No." Trevor's face reddened. The History Channel documentary was crystal clear. 1864. "I know what I watched." Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mrs. Henderson touched her husband's arm. I remained calm. "Perhaps we could verify online. Most phones have internet access." Trevor hesitated, confidence flickering. "Fine." He pulled out his phone with theatrical determination. "Let's settle this. Everyone can see how confused old academics get facts wrong." Henry watched with growing comprehension. "Trevor, please," Emily whispered. But he was committed. Phone glowing as guests waited. Christmas tree lights cast gentle shadows. Holiday decorations made an incongruous backdrop. "Let's see," Trevor muttered, typing aggressively. "Battle of Gettysburg date." The room held its breath. "July 1st through 3rd, his voice faltered. 1863. Silence stretched. "This can't be right," he muttered, scrolling frantically. "Wikipedia, Britannica, National Park Service. They all say 1863. Henry finished gently. "Yes, that's correct. But Trevor wasn't done. His desperation shifted into overdrive. Let me check something else. This Nobel Prize claim. I watched his face in the blue glow as search results populated. Each one drained more color. 1998 Nobel Prize in Economics. He read barely audibly. Martin James Banks, Yale University, for groundbreaking analysis of historical economic patterns. The phone trembled. He scrolled through result after result. Reuters, Nobel Foundation, Yale Archives. Emily moved close enough to see the screen, her face mixed with relief and concern. Other guests stood frozen. Sarah leaned forward, professionally curious. This is impossible, Trevor whispered, staring. Henry stepped forward gently. Martin never mentioned his Nobel Prize because he's genuinely modest. It's characteristic of distinguished scholars. The screen continued to glow with irrefutable evidence, ceremony photos, academic articles, archives. 40 years of accomplishment, laid bare. Trevor stood motionless, phone clutched, as reality restructured around him. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Okay, fine. He looked up, voice desperate. Maybe you got the dates right, but you never actually received that prize, did you? You're making that up. The accusation hung in the air. The ceremony was in Stockholm, December 1998, I said calmly. Lovely winter evening. The King of Sweden presented it personally. Trevor's face flushed crimson. You're lying. Prove it. Karl Duther 16 Gustaf. Quite gracious. We discussed Swedish economic policy briefly. That's impossible. Trevor's voice cracked. You're just some old professor from a community college. Henry stepped forward. Actually, Martin taught at Yale for 35 years. Quite prestigious. The room had gone completely silent. This can't be happening, Trevor muttered, scrolling frantically. The Nobel Foundation website has photos. I mentioned quietly. Trevor's phone slipped in trembling hands. He stared with something like horror. A man whose worldview had collapsed. Trevor, that's enough. Emily's voice cut sharp. She strode across the room with purpose. Every eye following. You're embarrassing yourself and everyone here. Trevor whirled to face her, desperation tinged with betrayal. I won't stand here listening to nonsense. This is some joke. Stop this immediately. Emily's voice rose. You're acting like a child who can't admit he's wrong. The room held its breath. Fine. Trevor threw his hands up. I'm leaving. I won't be humiliated in my own home. Then go. Emily shot back. But stop making it worse. Trevor stood frozen, not expecting her to call his bluff. Mrs. Henderson whispered to her husband. Other guests calculated exit strategies. Trevor grabbed his coat aggressively. Keys jingling. This is ridiculous. Emily followed him. Trevor, please, just drive carefully. He paused at the door, hand on the knob. Merry Christmas, everyone, he said bitterly, then stepped out. The door closed, echoing. Through the window we saw his BMW back out too fast. Emily stood at the window, watching his taillights disappear, her reflection ghost-like. The room remained frozen. Well, Emily announced, turning with forced cheer. Dinner is still warm, and I worked too hard on that crown roast to waste it. Guests exchanged uncertain glances. Please, she continued. Hostess smile masking turmoil. I'd appreciate the company. It's Christmas Eve, Henry responded first. Of course, my dear. It smells wonderful. Others gradually followed, resilience carrying them toward normalcy. As we moved to dinner, I found myself next to Violet Green, Emily's neighbor, a silver-haired woman in her early 60s, with intelligent eyes. Professor Banks, she said quietly, as Emily carved the turkey. I'm fascinated by your career. What an extraordinary evening. Please, call me Martin. Though tonight's been more dramatic than I prefer. Violet laughed softly. You handled it with remarkable grace. Dinner conversation found its rhythm. Wine was refilled. The meal eased frayed nerves. Guests asked respectful questions about my research. Yale, the Nobel ceremony. What was Stockholm like in December? Mrs. Henderson asked. Beautiful. Snow everywhere. The ceremony is formal. White tie, very European. Did you meet other laureates? Sarah asked, her curiosity redirected. As I shared stories, Violet listened with particular attention. Would you tell me more over coffee sometime? She asked, during a pause. I'd love to hear about your research. The invitation surprised me pleasantly. That sounds delightful. Emily, overhearing, smiled genuinely. I think that's wonderful, Dad. As the evening wound down, Violet and I exchanged numbers with polite awkwardness. Thursday afternoon, she suggested. There's a lovely coffee shop on Hawthorne. Perfect, I agreed, tucking her number away. Standing in the doorway as guests departed, I reflected on the evening's turns. I'd expected awkwardness, and instead found vindication, the collapse of illusion, and the beginning of new friendship. Thank you for tonight, Emily said quietly, for being dignified and kind, even when Trevor was impossible. Family is complicated, I replied, putting an arm around her. But truth has a way of emerging. Driving home through holiday-lit streets, I realized this Christmas Eve had given me something unexpected, a reminder that even at 68 new chapters are still possible. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. Break, breath.